to welcome you all into episode 43 of Trojan Talk. It's been a while since we've been on. We've had a lot of stuff going on at TA. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I first want to introduce my co-hosts. We have Josh Pulsifer joining us and Cole Purvis. How you guys doing today?
Awesome.
I'm ready for some Florida weather there. If anyone knows anything about Florida weather.
So right in my next point there. So Jeff Christenbury, unfortunately, is leaving. Well, not even leaving. He already has left Thornton Academy. He found a great opportunity at a private academy called Out of Door Academy. So he's going to be, I believe, the director of communications down there. Yep. Great for him. But that means we had a seat open on Trojan Talk, and we knew who we were going to bring. It's Josh Pulsifer, as always. So he'll be joining us for the rest of Trojan Talk for the year. And I'm assuming you guys will keep this going once I'm gone.
Oh, yeah.
Next
We're going to make you zoom in next year.
Yeah,
so
okay.
you're not done
Sounds
yet
good.
either. Yeah.
We got lots to talk about as, again, we've been off for a couple of weeks. And we'll start with basketball, as both teams unfortunately lost in the regional final this past weekend. It was a fantastic game and a great season for them, but unfortunately lost. I know I was there. Cole, I know you were there too. I'm not sure if you got to watch the game.
I watched all the games.
You
Yeah.
did? Okay, all right. So we can all talk about this. My first question for you guys is, what were your thoughts on the regional final games? First for boys and then for girls.
Well, start with the boys. We knew that they had some flaws coming in. They didn't play a great second half of the season. Of course, you have Will and Braden, and when you have those guys, you can win a state championship easily. But you look at some of the games where they lost to Bonnie Eagle, one of the last games of the regular season, and they nearly lost to Sanford, who is the second worst team in AA South. So there were a lot of problems on this team, especially defensively, and finishing at the rim was such a big thing. But for South Portland, everything broke right for them in those 2 days, the regional semifinals and the regional finals. When you think about it, Scarborough, they upset Gorham, so they go in to play South Portland, and South Portland gets a fairly easy game against the Scarborough Red Storm. Just no stress at all. They beat them by 20+. And then TA has the game right after that, and we'll talk about, we'll circle back to the Bonnie Eagle game in a second because we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
But TA has as stressful a game as you could possibly have, and South Portland comes in well rested. TA does not. Both teams off a back-to-back. And for South Portland, the moment I knew they were going to win the game is when their role players, their bench players, started hitting threes. Some of their guys that maybe don't get many minutes. I know Heffernan, he's a good baseball player. He hit a three, and then he had a huge block as well. Yep. And when players like that are making plays, your team is just clicking, and that's when I knew South Portland was probably going to come out on top. We'll get to the girls in a second, but the boys, it was a tough loss for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think couple of things that really hurt TA's boys basketball team down the stretch. Number one, right, in the first half of the season, they were averaging like over 60 points a game. Yeah. And then the second half of the season, what ended up happening was teams really switched to a zone defense against them, and that absolutely threw them for a loop. They really struggled against zone teams, and then you saw that in the Bonnie Eagle game, and then, of course, in the South Portland game, it was really just like a simple 2-3 zone. It wasn't anything too complex, but it just didn't work well with how TA liked to run their offense. And then the second thing teams did a much better job in the second half of the season was they really slowed down TA's fast-paced offense. TA likes to get moving. They've got the athletes to do that, but unfortunately, teams did a really good job slowing down their fast-paced offense, and that you saw that in the playoff game, especially against South Portland. They just really couldn't generate any offense, and it just shut down. And then obviously they played all right defensively. I don't think defensively they had any issues in the playoffs or even in the second half of the season. It just offensively didn't click. We had one of the best players in the state, Will Davies, obviously hit one of the most talked about shots in Maine high school basketball in recent memory. We can certainly talk about that here, but it was definitely, I would say, a disappointing season. You don't say that too often, making a regional final yet having a disappointing end. And so certainly I'm sure everyone in the Golden Trojans would like to have that game back against South Portland. But as Cole mentioned, I do think the back-to-back nights played a huge factor. Yeah. That snow delay was absolutely critical. You could tell they just looked tired coming into that Friday night game after playing Thursday night. Very tough game against Bonnie Eagle.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as Cole said, it came down to really the South Portland hit their shots, and just TA didn't. The TA's players that needed to, like Will Davis, Kamari, just at some points couldn't hit their shots. And I could tell that it's upsetting to those guys to lose not only to South Portland twice, but in the regional final twice. Like I said this to somebody the other day, is like I think that some of them would have rather lost in the state game than lost in the regional final, because they want, even just winning the South region, which they dominated all year, is a big accomplishment. So something that they missed for the second year in a row. But as Cole said, we have that shot in the Bonnie Eagle game. Will Davies hits a long two as the buzzer expires to win the game. the shot, as it's been looked upon many times, it looked like he did get the shot off before the red ring around the backboard went off. I've heard from multiple people that the horn was the actual what they should have, the refs were going off of, and they didn't hear the horn in time, so that's what they were going off of. But a lot of debate on whether or not the shot counted. What do you think about the whole situation, Cole, in what happened?
First of all, incredible game. Just back and forth. I've never seen anything like it. The back and forth from both teams, the high-level shot making on both sides. Will Davies on one end gets an and one. Elliot Bouchard does the same thing on the other end. And then the controversy on the final play takes away from how great of a play it was. You have 1.3 seconds left, and Trey makes an incredible pass, and Will just goes up through multiple defenders and high points the ball like a receiver, makes an incredible catch, puts it on the floor, gets it up, and it goes in. That is such an incredible shot, and of course nobody's going to talk about that because of the controversy. But it's a lot of confusion because think about how hard the ref's job is there. The refs can't really be watching the backboard and the red light and then Will's hand at the same time. So what they're doing is they're listening for the horn, and like you just explained, the horn is kind of synced up with the clock on the Jumbotron, and so the backboard clock isn't really synced up with you know what I mean. But so the refs have an incredibly tough job, and I know they've gotten a lot of criticism, but it's a tough call to make, and unfortunate for both sides because TA, maybe they shouldn't have won, Bonnie Eagle, maybe they, but it's all in the past. South Portland's moving on. Neither of those teams made a run, but just crazy for it to get the national recognition that it did.
Yeah, it's been on SportsCenter on Monday morning, which was unbelievable. It was obviously blew up virally on Twitter and social media over the weekend too. But like Cole said, it's like where Will is touching the ball, and we agree, obviously, that the light had gone off. It says 0 on the clock, but it's like from that point where he's touching it in that freeze frame to when it was actually released, you're talking like milliseconds.
Oh, yeah.
It is like a fraction of a second. So yes, obviously in hindsight, looking back on it, it shouldn't have counted if you're looking at those still images. But again, in the moment, as Cole said perfectly, it's such a tough judgment call. The other thing too, obviously that brings up the conversation of instant replay in Maine high school sports. Should that be a thing? That was obviously one of the big debated items here in the last few days. I don't think we're at a point technologically yet to implement that. I mean, it certainly would create disadvantages at certain sites where there was replay or wasn't replay. Certainly, maybe it's only a tournament thing, in the playoffs. Obviously, I don't think that could be implemented at any level at high school gyms. But certainly even then, that opens up a whole new can of worms of like, well, what is reviewable? And then you have to train the officials on that. It's a whole new situation. So like I said, I think sports is all about judgment calls. It's bang, bang stuff. And that just happened to be a major one that ended up gaining traction at the end of a game. And I always like to think too, though, it's like that one call didn't signify necessarily how that game went. There was a bunch of other calls in the other 32 minutes leading up to that moment. So certainly, again, very much talked about, very debated. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe debate brings up some changes that could be implemented next year. But certainly, again, TA benefited that night. But like you said, Zach, perfectly, neither team moved on in the end.
Yeah. We look over at girls basketball, also lost in the regional final. To me, this was the more disappointing loss because the girls, we talked about the boys pretty much, dominating in Class AA South. The girls, there's no word for it. They just they ran through every team. They steamrolled every team, and they get to a game like this. And I will say they didn't play terrible during most of the game, but in the last minute or so when they needed big buckets, they just couldn't get them. Missing, layups. Taking shots that didn't need to go. I mean, you're up like 4 or 5 points, and you're forcing possessions you don't need to make. What did you think about the end of that game?
It's pretty unexplainable, to be honest. They lose to Gorham 3 times in the regular season. Gorham was 9-9, which just shows you how kind of weak Class AA South was besides TA. And they lose 3 times in the regular season. The Hoops for Hope game. You
mean they beat them 3 times in the regular season?
They beat them. Yeah. Yes, they beat them 3 times in the regular season, including one by 34 points.
Yep.
You have to think maybe it brings up the discussion of a lot of teams got swept in the regular season and then got the other team back. Maybe they're saving something like a defense. And I know Gorham's coach is a really good coach. He's coached a lot of state championship teams. Maybe he saw something from those regular season matchups and just exploited it in the playoffs. I know On the boys' side, Portland kind of defended Tegan Pelletier a lot differently than they did in the regular season, and that's what kind of helped them beat Oxford Hills. So it's kind of like that, but it's tough to explain how dominant the girls were, and they had all the pieces. It was their year. They were just stacked from top to bottom. They couldn't get it done, and next year they'll come back with a great duo of Addison Sulikowski as a senior and Kylie Lamson with another year of improvement. So they'll be good next year, but this year is definitely their year, and it's a disappointing way to go out.
Yeah, it perfectly said, Cole. It was just really tough because, like you said, Zach, too, at the opening of this segment, it's like TA could have just held the ball. It's like they had the ball with like 45 seconds left and they were up and they decided to force a shot. It's like you didn't have to do that. There's no shot clock in Maine basketball. So they didn't have to do that. And then obviously we know how things went with Gorham going down scoring and ended up winning by 3. So again, very disappointing for Coach Marston and his team. Certainly they were, as we said, the proverbial favorites heading into the tournament. They looked really good. I mean, they were up in the fourth quarter. They went into the fourth quarter winning and they looked pretty good through most of the fourth quarter. It just at the end kind of just fell apart there. It's interesting because it's like basketball is always games of runs, whether it's at the high school level or in the NBA, of course. And certainly, Gorham just caught fire at that last minute. And certainly, again, TA, as we said, very stacked team this year. It looked like they had all the piecing to get to the state game at the very least. And then from there, who knows? It's anyone's game. But certainly, again, a very good season for them, though. I mean, I think at the end of the day, yes, it's disappointing they lost, but again, a lot to celebrate for that team this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And after getting to see Oxford Hills, who beat Cheverus in double overtime in the Class AA North regional final, I will say, I can say this with confidence that both Gorham and TA would have had a really tough time beating that Oxford Hills team. Yep. Sierra Carson, Ella Pelletier, who lead that team, they're just so good. It's the team is so great. So I think my pick is Oxford Hills to win this one. I just don't think Gorham has it, but a tough way to end their season. We will finish up talking about TA sports. First, we will give you some updates on swimming and indoor track. Their seasons are kind of at the end right now. States happen for both. Yep. For swimming, for the boys swimming team, Sebastian Shields won a state championship, and the girls won the Southwesterns the first time ever, which is pretty exciting and a nice feat for them. For indoor track, Maya Judice won a state championship in pole vault. She also set the TA record in the event at 10 feet and 10 inches. I can't even imagine somebody getting up that high and 10 feet in the air. I couldn't do that. So great individual performances for swimming and indoor track, and obviously great seasons as well for them. And now we will talk about boys hockey, who are the only team left in any kind of playoff contention. They're the number 2 seed in Class A with a matchup against the number 7 Marshwood Noble Nighthawks on tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Yeah, Friday night at 6:50.
Yeah. I forgot the time there. It is going to be our final Winter Sports broadcast on TATV. Cole and Josh and I will all be there, which will be nice and exciting, as well as Troy Bolduc. Can't forget Troy. But let's talk about boys hockey real quick. I mean, number 2 in Class A, only lost. The only team above them, Falmouth, they lost to twice, which were 2 unfortunate losses. But this team looks really good heading into the playoffs. A matchup like this should be a pretty solid win. But I don't know if you remember this, Josh. Last year, the boys team played Mount Ararat in the prelim game. Mount Ararat not great at all. Not a terrible team. And they only beat them 3-1, and they had to score late to win that game.
Yeah, that was a battle. I remember we broadcasted that game, and I was like, what is going on?
So what do you think about this matchup on Friday against Marshwood?
Yeah, I think, in hockey especially, it's like if you have a hot goaltender, anything's possible. We kind of saw that a little bit last year with Mount Ararat. Their goalie literally stood on his head for that whole game. That's what made it so close. TA was getting shot after shot off, but he was a big dude that just blocked everything. For TA, that's going to be the key to success here in the playoffs. We saw that last year, too, with Scarborough was the 7 seed, I believe, in the playoffs, and they ended up winning the state title over TA. So again, as long as the goalie play is solid, TA could advance very far. They should advance very far. Again, a regional final appearance for them should be absolutely at a bare minimum their goal versus, they probably should be back in the state title. They have the pedigree. They have the players back from that team last year. So they have a lot of pieces. It's just, can they put it all together here? And I think they can. I feel really confident. It seemed like talking to some of the guys this week, informally, that they're pretty excited. They've got all the blonde hair now. They've cut it all. So they're in the mood. They're excited. So I'm hoping that, again, they can put all those pieces together starting tomorrow night.
Yeah, and there's less teams this year, so they'll have to play, I believe, one less game to get back to the state championship.
Good point.
they've had some ups and downs this year. They've had a short losing streak in the middle of the season, but overall they're a very good team. And if they can play well defensively, I don't think they should have any problem with Marshwood. Then it sets up a matchup with either Scarborough or South Portland. I think South Portland would probably win, and those two teams split on the regular season, but I would still probably give TA the advantage. And we're looking really far down the road, but a Falmouth TA state championship would be a tough task for TA, but just to get back to that state championship is something that I certainly think they could do if they play well.
Absolutely.
I agree. And Cole, you bring up a good point. I mean, does it, at this point, are we pretty sure it'll be Falmouth TA? I mean, looking at these teams, both Falmouth and TA have beaten the teams once or twice that they could possibly match up against. I mean, is Falmouth versus TA kind of a sure bet now?
Falmouth is a wagon. They are so good, but I don't know about TA.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a solid series for them. And again, quarterfinal matchup on Friday, and then next Tuesday will be their semifinal matchup. I'm not sure who it'll be against yet, but once we do, we'll be plugging that as we can. And now let's move over to our pro sports segment, and we can't talk about any other team or sport than the Boston Bruins.
You've been waiting all day for this, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the only times we ever really recorded later in the day. We usually do it in the mornings, and so it's actually the best thing that happened because lots of things happened today. I'm going to go through a couple of things. I'm going to list off some trades, and then I want you guys to just give me a grade, A+ to F, on where you think this is for Boston. So if you are unaware, Boston's the best team in the NHL by 10 points. This is the time of year during the trade deadline where teams beef up their rosters as they head into some playoff runs. So earlier, a couple weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, the Bruins added Garnet Hathaway and Dmitry Orlov, two solid guys who have playoff experience. They traded that for a first-round pick next year, a second-round pick, a third, and a fourth in the next couple of years, and Craig Smith, which was a salary cap dump. Then today, after hearing of some injuries to Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno, they traded for Tyler Bertuzzi for a first-round pick in 2024, which is top 10 protected, which has some significance to it, and a fourth-round pick in 2025. And then right after that, they re-signed David Pastrnak to an 8-year, $11.25 million contract. I wish I was making $11.25 million a year. That would be insane. So give me the grades you think of these two trades, and then what you think about the re-signing of David Pastrnak.
Absolutely. So Hathaway and Orlov, love that trade. That's an A.
Yep.
Hathaway is from Kennebunkport, by the way, so local Maine guy, so that's awesome. Orlov's done awesome so far. He's had 2 goals, 2 assists, so he's playing great in the first couple of games. Again, they gave up a lot of picks, but again, for picks, like I don't really care about picks. It's like, you know what? It's like you don't know what's going to happen with picks. It's like, or you get 2 guys, proven NHL vets that can do it right now in this run that we're on. It's like, absolutely, lock that up. Yeah. Bertuzzi, I thought the first was a bit much. And a fourth, he's an unrestricted free agent this summer. So I don't know if they're going to be able to re-sign him. Yep. I think that's a rental, and they're paying a steep price for him. But you know what? If it brings a cup, you know what? That's the price of a rental. And then the Pasta re-signing, it's a lot. It's a lot of money. I guarantee Don Sweeney wished they could have secured him during this offseason, like prior offseason that we just had, because his value has only gone up right now. He's second in the NHL in points, only to Connor McDavid, and certainly his value has only skyrocketed. The average AAV is $11.25 million, as you said, but as we looked at the salary cap breakdown today, it's like I think the hit next year is like $13 million for the next 2 years after this. So it's going to be a lot of salary for one player. And again, there's a hard cap in the NHL. So it's going to be tough. I'm not sure how they're going to construct the rest of the roster next year. Obviously, you know, Bergeron and Krejci are going to come off the books. They're both going to retire, it looks like. So certainly that will free up some money. But they're going to have to get creative moving forwards. But again, I love all three. I think for the grade, I don't think I graded Bertuzzi. I give that a B.
Yep.
And then Pasta, that's an A-. Should have been an A, but A-.
Cole, I know you're not.
Cole's like, yes.
See, I have to give you credit because
I like that the Bruins are going all in because it seemed like they were in no man's land. Like they kind of lost in the first or second round every year, so they had to change something up. So I have no idea what the moves mean, but I like that they're making moves.
I like that you're honest, Cole.
Yeah, I will say I understand, you know, not knowing these players or you know how much the picks cost or how much their value is, but I want to give you credit because over the last year or so, your hockey knowledge has increased so much, and you've actually put some time in to to catch yourself up on where teams are in the standings or where the Bruins are or whatnot. So even though you may not know as much about this, I appreciate your enthusiasm to give an answer. But I'll give you a question that maybe is a little bit more general. So Pastrnak signs 8 years for $11.25 million. What do you think about? So I don't know if you know this, but basically they can teams can like they're doing now. Pastrnak will be paid $13 million in the first couple years of his contract, and then paid less later in the years on his deal. So he'll be paying like $9 million for him later. Yeah. What do you think about teams being able to do that? Do you think that's a fair thing? Do you think it's a smart thing to do, or do you think they should just keep it flat and do whatever the value is over how many years?
I think it's interesting, and I don't see the problem with it. How old's Pastrnak? Like
he's 27, 28,
7. Yeah, he's right there.
Right in the middle of his prime. So you pay him less money as his career kind of winds down.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good.
Yeah,
I'm only in favor of it if the player can't be cut. So, for instance, like it wouldn't work before, like if you could cut the player and be like, don't put all of his salary at the end of the deal. Yeah. So I know the NHL used to do that before. Like, who am I thinking of? The Devils did it. They were the first ones to really be egregious.
Ilya Kovalchuk.
It was ridiculous. Yeah, that's what was like the tipping point. We're like, okay, timeout. Like you can't manipulate the contract, the AAV like that. So, but since they figured that out, I think it's fair.
Yeah, I agree. We'll move on to talk some NBA now. This might have happened a couple weeks ago, but I've been seeing it on social media a little bit more. I think it was during All-Star break. Maybe it was a little bit before then. Anthony Edwards had a post-game press conference where he was asked if he could change one thing in the NBA, what would he change? And he pretty out there, quite quickly, said that he doesn't like that players will sit and rest. He doesn't like that players will not play sometimes or take a day off. And his reason is similar to something that I think I've seen Michael Jordan used to say when he was playing, that he always wanted to perform every night at his best level for the one fan that's coming to see him from hundreds of miles away. And Anthony Edwards, pretty similar, he said, you never know when there's going to be someone who's never seen me play in the stands, and I think we should do it for the fans. And so and stuff like that. So I just want to get your thoughts. What do you think about that? Do you think that sitting players is something in the NBA that needs to happen because of injuries? Or do you agree with him? Do you think that players should play as much as they possibly can?
I think they should play as much as they can. And not just the NBA. I think every sport. Case in point, like I actually bought some Red Sox tickets the other day, and I bought them for a Sunday game because it's easier for my kids to go in the afternoon.
Yep.
But Sunday games in the MLB are notorious for players just taking it off because it's usually a travel day. After the game, they travel to another city, and they don't like to play Saturday night and then wake back up again and do it again. So that's like their load management day. So I was kind of like, I don't know if I should buy tickets for this game or not. But the same is true in the NBA. Charles Barkley had some pretty critical comments about it after Anthony Edwards, and Barkley had some really good thoughts on like you're getting paid in upwards of tens of millions of dollars. You telling me you can't go play basketball for 48 minutes? And again, we don't want anyone to go out there if they're actually hurt. And I think that's not what we're suggesting. But some of these guys are like literally just taking days and weeks off because they're like, I'm a little sore. But and that's what Charles was saying. He's like, you're gonna have bangs and bruises and you're gonna be muscle strains. But it's like, at what point is it like, okay, you're starting to hurt not only your team, but the league's image with fans, as you said. I think it's a huge issue, and certainly it's not cheap to go to any pro sports game anymore. I think we all can agree with that. So, shelling out hundreds of dollars for a family of 4 to go, and then all of a sudden, like 3 players don't play just because they're tired. Like, I just personally, as a fan, am kind of offended by that. And I think Adam Silver and any league commissioner have to be really conscientious of that. I think the only league that obviously avoids that is the NFL, except for, of course, week 18. We know that's when teams usually rest players for playoffs. But other than that league doesn't have that issue. Baseball has it. Like I said, Sundays are notorious for it, or any travel day are notorious for it. Obviously, in the NBA, we're talking about it. NHL, not as much, maybe on back-to-back nights, they'll obviously structure that. But the NBA's definitely got it can be a PR nightmare if they don't address it sooner rather than later. And I'm not sure how to address it. Maybe it's like they don't get paid their salary that night. Maybe that's it. It's like, well, it's not you're injured. It's just your load management. So maybe that's the solution.
Yeah, it's a grind. The season is a grind, and you got to just go out there and I haven't really talked about this on the air, I think, but I've watched much less of the NBA than I have in past years because I don't really think the regular season matters a whole lot. And I'm into college basketball, which I know you and Mr. Christenbury aren't really on board with the whole college basketball thing, but I just think there's more urgency in the NBA, especially like the first 3 quarters of a regular season game. It's just a lot of guys running around, sloppy defense. I hate to turn this into a broader thing about the NBA, but I just think there's a lot of problems with it, and load management is just one of those problems. But yeah, you're getting paid millions of dollars. It's a grind. Go out there and play, and it can be a tough job to compete at that level. But with the amount of money that these guys are getting paid, if you have a minor injury like back soreness, I know Ben Simmons has that like every night. He sits out, but yeah, I definitely think it's a problem.
Yeah, and the point that you made, Josh, is that, with the NFL, it's a little bit different. And I think as a fan, it's pretty clear that if your team is in the playoffs, they're going to sit some of their guys before the playoffs. That's like pretty common knowledge.
Yeah.
But like when you look at these NBA or even MLB, like these guys just randomly sitting out because they don't feel they're tired or they don't feel like playing that night or they've played a lot of games in a week. Like, that happens. That's the scheduling. Like I know some leagues like the NHL, scheduling can be a nightmare sometimes, but it's the way that it works. You're paid. That's what you're paid to do. So sometimes you just have to suck it up and play.
It was crazy. Like real quick, it's like I went to the first Nets Celtics playoff game last year in Boston, and like I watched Ben Simmons warm up, and I was courtside watching it, and like he was going like through the hardest workout I've ever seen in my life, and I was like, how can this guy not be playing in the next hour? I'm like, he just went through an intense workout, and he was perfectly fine. And like that kind of stuff. Like I know he was obviously going through some other issues last year, but it's like that's and like some of these guys who warm up before the game too, and then they're like, oh, I'm not going to play. It's like KD. Like, could he not have played for the Suns before last night? Like, he probably could have played.
But one more thing to add to that is the whole play-in thing means there's less urgency in the regular season, and so you're not you're not as inclined to go out there and fight for a playoff spot when we can get the play in, even if we still have a chance if we're the 9 or 10 seed.
That's the only thing I'm worried about with the Celtics this year. It's like they've been so good for so long. It's like I think what happened last year, it's like they burnt out by June. They were just so tired.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. We'll finish up this episode by talking about the MLB pitch clock. Now, I see here, I don't know if this is Cole or
I added this.
You added this. So about the Red Sox game that ended on an automatic third strike due to the batter not being ready within 8 seconds. I had no idea that happened yesterday. So it ended up in a 6-6 tie. But this MLB pitch clock I think it's the stupidest thing ever. I understand that like sometimes pitchers take way too long, but to restrict somebody to a certain amount of time, I don't know.
It's quick. If you've been to a minor league game recently in the last couple of years, they've been doing it in all the minors. So it's not. So some of these guys have been brought up with it. The younger guys. It was wild. It was the Red Sox Braves game, and it ended bases loaded, 3-2 count, 2 outs. Game ended because the batter was not in the umpire's opinion. And again, that's the other part of this. It's the opinion of the home plate umpire, whether or not they're quote unquote ready. The rule is the batter's eyes have to be looking forward. He has to have his front foot in the box, and he's prepared to basically swing. And according to this umpire, that wasn't what he was doing.
With 8 seconds.
With 8 seconds remaining in the pitch clock. And with runners on base, the pitch clock is 20 seconds. So basically from the time the last pitch is delivered, he has 12 seconds to basically reset and get back in the box and be facing forward for the next pitch. It was kind of crazy. I saw the highlights on Twitter. Twitter kind of blew up with it. But the research shows that the pitch clock in the minors cuts about a half hour off of each game time. That's what MLB needs. They need shorter games, and so it'll probably end up being about I guesstimate about 2.5 to maybe a 3-hour game, but they want to be right around that 2.5 hour average because baseball's a little long in some cases. So it's an interesting thing. I know pitchers are the ones who are probably going to struggle with it a little bit more because they're probably going to tire out a little faster. They're going to have to work a lot faster. So again, management of the bullpens will be even more critical this year actually. So I don't know. It definitely goes against purism. I'll say that. It's a weird thing to see. But going to some Sea Dogs games the last few years, I've seen it in person, and from a fan's perspective, I really didn't notice any difference.
Me neither. And I like it because people are surprised that there's going to be an adjustment. People were outraged over the Red Sox Braves ending and a lot of these strikeouts or balls or walks or whatever. Like, of course there's going to be an adjustment when you put in a rule like this, but that's what spring training's for. You get used to it. Then the regular season, I think I heard somebody, I forget who it was, talking about how in the minors last year it was down to like a half a violation per game because the guys were just used to it.
Yep.
In my opinion, 15 seconds is too short, though. I think it should be 20 seconds. And then I think either with runners on base or runners in scoring position, it should be 25 seconds, which I know is pretty long, but we could have a little bit more leniency when it comes to that. It doesn't need to be throw the pitch, move as fast as you can. Just cut out these 40 seconds in between pitches. That was the real problem with the MLB, and it's going to be an adjustment for the players, the batters as well. It's not just the pitchers. The batters are going to have to get in the box as well. And the other thing is the shift. They banned the shift, so you have to have at least two players on each side of second base. I don't really understand that. It seems kind of unfair to me. It's a defensive strategy. I mean, it's like saying you can't blitz on third down.
Right. If you're a major league hitter and you can't hit opposite field, what are you doing in the batter's box?
Yeah.
That's always been my opinion. Like, if they're shifting and there's literally no one even playing the third baseline, drop a bunt. Put the ball in play. Like, that's on you as the hitter. And if you can't do that, if you just keep pulling, like, I'm sorry, you're going to get out.
It's a defensive strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I'm glad you said that about the shift. It's like, I'm more mad about the size of the bases being larger. It's like,
I did see that.
Yeah, they made bigger bases so there was less distance between the base pass, so you could steal more.
And it's not even like
it's like
it's not even like a quarter of an inch. It's
a lot.
It's
yeah,
huge.
they
It's a lot.
plug it as a safety thing, so
it's
that
not safety.
That the feet don't get
that's
tangled
ridiculous.
up.
No, it creates shorter distances between base pass, and I don't like that. It's like you're literally gonna have to go across America and replace every single base pass in America.
Yeah,
like you think about that. Like at TA, we need to replace the bases.
Yep.
Or there needs to be a rule change because we're not playing with Major League Baseball regular baseball size bases now. So what are we gonna do about that? So it's like that's the trickle down effect. So
but
I don't know.
Back to the pitch clock. I mean, I can definitely see what you guys are saying when it comes to it being a fan. 30 minutes less of a game makes it more exciting, or I'm more likely to watch a full game.
Yeah.
But I just don't. I don't know.
We'll get used to it.
Yeah, I think the players will too. I don't know if maybe I'm just not informed or haven't been paying attention as much, but in my opinion, this kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know if this has been coming for a couple of years, but I had no idea that they were adding this clock until they added it in the summer.
I will say the one thing that baseball does a really good job is using the minor leagues as a testing system. Okay. They've been testing this for years and years and years. Okay. The next thing to come, Zach, this will really blow your mind, is robot umpires. That is happening. They're
as in like actual.
It is just decided
physical robots, or
it's decided by a computer, and the umpire behind the plate just relays whatever the computer says to them.
Do you think that'll be better for the game?
I don't.
We'll get to it when it comes.
Yeah. We'll get there but they're doing it this year in the minors, so it's already happening.
They are.
Yes.
So
not every minor league, but certain leagues are testing it. So that is coming down the road. And then the umpire behind the plate is basically just like a moderator, more or less, just like helping to officiate. But
so there'll still be
a guy behind the plate, but he's just going to relay what the pitch was, ball or strike.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for episode 43 of Trojan Talk. I want to thank Cole and Josh for joining us for this episode. We hope you like the new template that we are implementing here. Trying to change it up a little bit. Not that it was bad when Jeff was here, but we just, shout out to Jeff there. We just, we thought it was time for some change and maybe something, just to do something new. Because why not just continue to update and be creative. But again, we want to thank you all for watching, and we will try to get back into a weekly or bi-weekly schedule. Again, it's been a really crazy with winter sports, but as they're ending, weekly should be our back to our old schedule. So that'll do it for episode 43. Thank you all for watching, and have a good week.